Hi guys, welcome back. This week I'm going to be making two beers. The first one is going to be a Belgian Strong Dark Ale, and then the second one is going to be some sort of small beer. What I'm thinking is probably something along the line of a English bitter or something. So I'm making this at the beginning of the week because I'm going to get a lot of sun here at the end of the week, and I'm going to use my solar power to boil this beer for free rather than paying for the energy. So what I'm trying to create with the first beer is a Belgian Strong Dark or a Quad, but it's going to be very light on alcohol. It'll be down in the sort of 8% mark. So it's a bit light for what I would like to call a Quad. I usually consider a Quad to be up sort of around the 10% mark, although the style guidelines certainly comes down to 8%. This is really just a trial run of using a long boil in a Quad or a Belgian Strong to see what I can get out of those caramelized flavors of the long boil. So I'll start running through the recipe I've got for this anyway, and then we'll chat about it as I go. So for starters, I'm going to start with 3.6 kilo of pale malt. Now, generally, I think you'd use Pilsner in a Belgian Strong Dark, but I want strong malt flavors. I also want strong caramel flavors in this as well. So on the stronger flavors, I'm going to go for the pale to get that more malty flavor out of it. Then I'm going to have 1,000 grams, 1 kilo of Munich malt, and obviously that's going to give a lot more malty flavor to it along with the pale malt. I don't want too much of the burnt crust type taste. I want mostly toast that I'm going to get from the Munich malt, but I do want a little bit of the burnt crust element of it. So therefore I'm going to get I'm going to use 300 grams of dark Munich in there as well, and that'll give that slightly deeper, slightly sharper, probably not the right word, more defined toasted malt flavor from that dark Munich. On the more defined, darker notes, I want a little bit of chocolate flavor in there. So I'm going to use 100 grams of Carafa Special 1. And I'm using the special rather than the standard Carafa because it's dehusked, it's debittered, and it should come across as a softer note in it. Then we get onto the sugar aspect of the Belgian Dark. Normally, I think you'd probably choose to use all candy sugar in this, a dark candy sugar. I'm going to get a lot of caramel out of the boil on this, so I don't want too much caramel and burnt sugar type flavor coming from my sugars. So most of my sugar, I'm going to use white sugar. So I'm going to use 850 grams of just plain white table sugar. Obviously that's going to give a lot more alcohol. It'll make it more drinkable. It'll lighten it up somewhat. But I do want some of those dark caramel and melanoidin flavors coming from candy sugar. And one of the reasons for that is there are fruit flavors come from candy sugar, the dark candy sugar. You get berry sort of flavors coming from it. So I am going to use 250 grams of my dark candy sugar, and if you want to see how that's made, I've got a video for that as well. So that dark candy sugar will give more of those deeper notes of melanoidin through to it. However, I want this strong dark to be quite caramelly. I want it to be malty, yes, but I also want it to be quite caramelly. Now I don't want to get that from crystal malt because that'll end up being too thick, too cloying, and completely the wrong taste. So this is where the long boil comes into it. If you've seen the barley wine, long boil barley wine video, I talked a lot about the caramel flavors that are introduced into that. Now, the caramel that comes from a long boil, it's a unique flavour. I can't get that from anywhere else. It's something very, very unique to that long boil process. And I think it's going to go quite well in these Belgian ales. So this is my beginning to trial it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about a 6-hour boil. I'd like to get minimum 6-hour boil. And I'll boil that in a big pot, so I've got a large surface area on the bottom to get a lot more caramelization across a very large area rather than around a small element. And then I'll put it all back into the Braumeister and I'll do a final 1-hour boil with all of the hops in the end. So getting on to the hop schedule, I suppose, what I'm going to use is all Styrian Goldings in this. I'm going to start with 50 grams of Styrian Goldings at the 1-hour mark, right at the beginning. And I'm going to go for 20 grams of Styrian Goldings at the 15-minute mark. And I'm using Styrian Goldings because, well, it's quite a traditional Belgian hop in Belgian beers. But I want the herbal notes, I want those light peppery notes that you get from Styrian Goldings. It's going to go very well. And I get enough IBU out of this as well to counter all of the sweet, sugary sort of taste that you're going to get with the higher alcohol. Yeast wise, I'll use White Labs WP 530 Abbey Ale yeast. I know this yeast fairly well. The attenuation I get out of this is a lot less than certainly Beersmith predicts. I'm estimating I'll get somewhere in the probably mid 8% with this from the attenuation on that. Water's nothing particularly special, bit of a balanced profile. I'm going to lean very, very slightly towards the chloride side of it, very slightly towards the malty side, but essentially just a light balanced profile. The mash will be nothing special. I'll dough in at 40 and then it'll be a single temperature mash after that at 67 and a mash out at 77 for 5 minutes. Then getting on to the second beer, I'm going to have 5 kilo or so of malt in this, which is a reasonable bit for the Braumeister. There should be a little bit of sugar left in it. I don't know how much because I've never tried remashing the grains. So it's going to be a bit of an experiment just to see how much more sugar I can draw back out of it. I'm going to have the time. I'm going to have 6 hours of boiling outside for this. So I've got loads of time. So what I'll do is I'll put it through the best part of a full mash. But at the beginning of the mash, I'll see what gravity I've got in that wort. And then I'll go and mill some specialty grains. I'll kind of make it up as I go, depending on what sort of sugar level I get. And then I'll work out a hop schedule to go with whatever I get at the time. I'm going to use some SO4 yeast, S04. That will give me an English ale type beer, so it makes sense to make an English bitter with it. But we'll wing it a little bit on that. That's really about all as far as the planning process goes. I am, as I say, I'm making this a week beforehand. I'll get ready, I'll do an early start, and it'll be a long brew day. So next you see, we'll move on to that. Okay, the mash is complete now, so now I've got to transfer the wort into the pot. I've got about 21 litres of wort in there, and I've only got a 19 litre pot. Obviously that's not going to fit anyway, but I don't want it too full because I don't want it to boil over. So I'll probably put about 2/3 or so full into this. I'll get it out onto the hob, get it boiling. The rest of the wort I'll put into another pot so that I can just add it into this slowly as it boils down. So let's get it moving. Okay, that's full enough for the time being. Let's get it outside and get this boiling. And that's the boil started. So I'll go and get the rest of the wort out and put it into a pot, and then we'll get the rest of the stuff done in the kitchen. Right, I finished emptying out the kettle. The rest of the wort is sitting in this pot, and I'm just going to leave this sitting on the stove, which I'll reheat periodically just to keep it hot. Now the hard part is to make the second beer. I'm slightly winging it with this, which I don't like to do. So what I'm going to do to not wing it quite so much is I'm going to put the grains back in this. I'll fill it with water. I'll start the mash running and I'll have a look what color I get out of this. I'll even take a gravity sample on it, and I'll see how much sugar I've got left in it. And then I'll decide how much of the extra grains I'll put in to get this beer to work. Plus, let's not forget the water adjustment profile. I'm just going to use the same profile as I'm using for the quad out there, but I'm going to add this to this water that I'm adding in slowly, just to dissolve it all in here, because there's a reasonable amount of chalk in this profile. So I'll get it dissolved in there with a little bit of acid as well, and then we'll check the pH afterwards. Well, I've been testing the pH, I've been testing the gravity on this. I've brought the pH down to about 5.3 at the moment. By the time I go and stick some dark grains into it, the pH will come right down, which I think is going to be important because it's extremely light, so I need as much extraction out of this as I can. So we'll get a really low pH. The gravity at the moment is about 1010 on that. So pre-boil gravity of 1010 on that's going to be pretty weak by the time we finished. So I'm going to go and mess around with a little bit of calculations on grains to see what I can get. I'll go out and I'll mill some, and then we'll come in, I'll put them into the mash and continue that mash for, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour or so. Right, I've just been out milling up some grains. The plan I've come up with is I've put in 40 grams of Simpson's roasted barley. I've put in 150 grams of Simpson's dark crystal, and I've got 100 grams of cookie malt in there. So the idea is I'm going to try it with the crystal malt. I just want a bit of body and obviously a little bit of sweet and some flavour for that. The biscuit malt is going to give this really light wort a bit more oomph to it, I guess. And the roast barley, then it'll darken it down, give it a bit of colour. It'll give it a little bit of bite as well. That's the plan. So I'll pop them in and I'll see how it goes. Well, this has been mashing now for about 40 minutes, and let's face it, that's about as much extraction as I'm likely to get out of it. I haven't got all day. I've still got to boil the other beer back in here with all the hops, so let's not waste any more time. I'm going to take the grains out of here now and we'll get the boil underway on this. Okay, temperatures turned up, so let that heat and get the boil going, and I'm going to go and work out some bit of a hop schedule to put in this now. All right, throwing a rough hop schedule together. I've come up with, I'm going to put 10 grams of Fuggles in at 60 minutes in the boil. I'm going to put 15 grams of East Kent Goldings in at 20 minutes to go in the boil. And then I'll put a really big hit of 30 grams of Centennial pellets in at 5 minutes to go in the boil. Then they can sit there through the cool down and settling period, and hopefully I'll get a good citrus note to the end of this. I've also done a little bit of calculation on, well, firstly I've rechecked now after the mash what gravity I've got out of this, and I thought I'd get more, if I'm honest, out of 40 minutes mash, but I've only got 10, 13 is my gravity at the moment pre-boil, which, if nothing else, goes to show how really efficient these electric systems are, especially the Braumeister. I mean, it's extracted just most of the sugar out of that grain. So because of that, I'm only going to end up with about 1.3, 1.4% beer potentially. And I want it to be up in the 3% mark, 3.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick in a kilo of pale malt extract, dry malt extract into the boil in this, just to bump the gravity up a little bit and give it at least a little bit more taste to it. Half a well flock at 15 minutes. And finally 5 minutes to run. I've got the Centennial to go in. All right, that's an hour boil up. It's time to get this one cooled, get it into a fermenter and get some yeast pitched onto it. Then I need to give this a quick brush out, a little wash out, and get the quad into it. And that's the extra, or the free beer, done. Let's go and have a look how the quad's doing and get that in the Braumeister. Well, the quad's been boiling for about 6 hours out here now. We're starting to lose the sunlight, so I'm losing my free solar energy, so there's no point, I think, boiling it any longer. We're down to about 8 litres, as you can see there, which means we've boiled off 13 litres over the day. You can also see the amount of protein that it's been producing at that time and coagulating. I'll try and sift some of that out when I put it back into the Braumeister, but I probably won't get a great deal of it, but I'll give it a shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'll put it back into the Braumeister. I'll top it back up with water up to the 21 litre mark. Then I'll do a normal boil and we should get the right gravity at the end of that. So let's get this inside. Right, this has been a long enough video as it is, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly open these, pour them out, and we'll have a quick chat about them. So first up, here's the small beer, the little bitter. And this one is the Belgian Dark. Okay, I've done this in the tall glass for no other reason than I think that the colour's really nice on it. It looks nice, so just to be able to get a bit of a look through it. So I stand aside, get a quick shot on that for the two beers. Quickly, let's have a look at the bitter. It's really clear. I don't think I'll get a shot on that for you. If I get behind it, you can see maybe a bit of colour in that. Smell wise, it smells like an English bitter. You can smell that SO4 yeast, and you can smell that real malt. That actually the base malt from the Belgian Strong is really coming through in it. You can actually smell Munich coming through in there. It smells good. It's bitter, it's light. There are some chocolatey notes in there. It's bready, it's bread crusty. It's everything I would want, to be honest, out of an English bitter. That's really nice. It's got plenty of body to it, but it's quite light on alcohol. Really easy drinker. To be honest, that's so good that I think that's inspired me to do one of these just as a standalone beer at some point. But considering that really didn't cost me a great deal in grains or time, I had time on my hands anyway. It's that's a really good little beer. So the Belgian, top that up a bit. It smells sweet. You can really smell the sugar in it. You can smell the caramel, that's for sure. And I think I'm getting the Styrian Goldings coming through there as well. Just lightly peppery and herbally. Yeah. Straight away, really sweet, really caramelly, and it's as I've said before about this boiling, it is not crystal malt type caramel at all. It's a unique caramel that I only get from doing long boils like this. This started off maybe being a bit too strong on caramel. But as this is aged, and it's been in the bottles now for 3 months, I think, that caramel has mellowed, and it's all melded into a really good, solid beer. You can taste the alcohol in there, even though it's only low 8%. You can taste the alcohol. There's no heat to that alcohol at all. It's just smooth and fits in with the beer. There's a hint of chocolate there, but not strong at all. Lovely Belgian strong dark ale. That not quite potent enough that I would want to call it a quad, but it's something I'm going to revisit. I'm going to up that and strengthen it up. I'm going to use the long boil method for my next quad. I don't know whether I'll go for quite that many hours. I might dial it back a little bit, but definitely to put those caramel notes into the Belgian beer, that's a great method, and just a unique taste, as I say. Anyway, I got 2 beers to get through. It's only just after lunch, so this might write off the rest of the day, but the sun's out, so I'm going to go outside and enjoy this. Till next time, life's good, drink more beer.